joining us now, former CIA officer, FBI special agent. She's also the author of a book that Nick's been dying to read, The Unexpected Spy, From the CIA to the FBI, My Secret Life, taking down some of the world's most notorious terrorists. And that's Tracy Walder. Tracy, Mike and Nick, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike and Nick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Tracy, I reached out to you because I watch NewsNation. I was seeing you last night. You were describing a little bit about the mall because you happen to live in the surrounding areas. Can you just tell our audience a little bit about who's not familiar? I mean, we've all been to a mall in America, right? But we're not familiar so much with the layout. And now videos have started to surface of how the shooter came in out of his vehicle and started shooting people that were entering this part of the mall. Can you take our audience inside a little bit of the layout of the mall and the area itself and the town?
Sure. It's really why I think he chose this mall, quite frankly, because the reality is from where he was coming from, he had to drive past arguably the two largest indoor malls in the state. And I think the reason he picked this particular mall, the Allen Outlet Mall, it's a very sprawling facility. So you're talking, you have these 120 plus stores, plus you have grocery stores, movie theaters, all of that. And it's actually all outdoors. You access all of the stores from outdoors with sort of a central gathering place. And I think that's quite frankly why he picked this. There's no parking structure. As you get out into Allen, I'm in kind of Dallas proper, so it's about 20 miles north, so it's a suburb. You have more space, right? And so this is more spread out. It's not built up like we see kind of down in Dallas proper. And so really, it's very easy access. You don't have to navigate a parking structure, and you theoretically don't have to enter into an enclosed mall facility.
Tracy, when we think about the response to the shooting right now, obviously from a news perspective, we hear about local response. Obviously, we're getting details from local law enforcement, but from an FBI perspective, because obviously you've been a member of the agency, where does the FBI play a role in terms of trying to think about this more from a national scale, data collection? I know that there's obviously different pieces. Obviously, we've spoken with Frank Figliuzzi in the past about these types of things. But from your purview, though, where does the FBI get involved in a situation like this, or do they?
So most likely they will. Frank is an amazing guy. So, here you're dealing with two different really jurisdictions. So you've got Allen Police Department that's obviously investigating the shooting itself. However, the suspect, his house is in the jurisdiction of the Dallas Northeast Division Department. The problem is right now, I'm guessing that they are absolutely bringing in the FBI to help from a forensics perspective. You have hundreds of witnesses in a case like this. So you have to triage all of those witnesses. Which ones are going to give the most information? Which ones were closest really to the shooting itself? So I'm guessing they will be bringing in the FBI to help with that. Also, in terms of forensics, again, this is a massive crime scene, digital forensics, biologic forensics, all of those things the FBI needs to help with. Also, fun fact that I don't think is being reported a lot, DPD actually was hacked with ransomware just a few weeks ago. So their computers are actually down. And so I'm guessing that the FBI is most likely assisting with that as well, to sort of make that up because that's where the suspect's parents lived and where he was from.
Tracy, just a follow up to that, from a data perspective, when things like this happen, where does the FBI play a role? Because I remember back in, I think like November 2022 was reported that only maybe 63% precincts nationally were reporting into hate crime statistics from an FBI standpoint. Not that this is necessarily a hate crime. I mean, there's obviously information that we're still trying to pour through to make sense of all that. But just from where you stand on this, when it comes to data collection, the national narrative, as we understand with guns and violence in this country, what may come from the FBI's role in learning what happened in Allen and what we're seeing just happening across the country?
I think, kind of an added layer and what's being really reported the most on today in the Washington Post and several other publications really is his potential connection to really a movement that's associated, quite frankly, with the Proud Boys. And if that's the case, then, really the FBI will become more actively involved. The reality is crime statistics as a whole, you don't have to report them. Look, there is no law that says any kind of police or local law enforcement jurisdiction has to report their crime statistics to the Bureau. And quite frankly, most of the time they play them down. I mean, this is what we teach, what I teach in my criminal justice college courses. Most of the time they're played down. And so as a result of that, you are really not getting a fully transparent picture of crime reporting. And so I think that that's obviously problematic, because if you're not getting that full picture, then you're not getting the maximum amount of resources that can be allocated towards that department to help them, quite frankly, in terms of mitigating these kinds of crimes.
You know, Tracy, one of the big things that I'm struggling with, and it's kind of like this two hats that I wear. First, hosting this news commentary podcast, reaching out to subject matter experts like you that have been in the field. And then there's the other part, right? The parent of two children, one who's in school and has seen, you know, just the most mundane of activities be impeded upon by shooting. And we're not getting to the root cause of all of this, right? It's not drag show flyers, like I like to say, or ninja stars or anything else that's nonsensical. Each person has a weapon, right? A weapon of mass destruction in a lot of these cases. And one of the other drawbacks has been, I have learned now, members of Congress in different districts that make no sense with respect to their retorts when they go on television. I want to play a clip for Representative Keith Self, who represents the district. And he said something on CNN recently when he was asked about this. I want you to react on the other side. Take a listen to this.
Now, you know, Congressman, that is a common refrain after these incidents, after mass shootings, but many people argue that prayers aren't cutting it. Prayers are not preventing the next mass shooting. What is your response to that criticism?
Well, those are people that don't believe in an almighty God who is absolutely in control of our lives. I'm a Christian. I believe that he is. We have people, though, with mental health that we're not taking care of. Since this nation made the decision that we were going to close the mental health institutions, many of these situations are based on that. And the people that say, and I would like to stay away from the politics today because I want to focus on the victims. Today, we should be focused on the families. Prayer is powerful in the lives of those people that are devastated. I know people want to make this political, but prayers are important. And they are powerful in the families who are devastated right now.
So, Tracy, and again, it's one of the reasons why I invited you on the show after watching your NewsNation segment, but I'd already been following you on Twitter. But you hear something like that as somebody who's worked in law enforcement, to stop the bad guys, right? Good guy with gun stops bad guy with gun, right? That's the stuff we always hear. Thoughts and prayers. What do you make of a congressman like that, especially somebody that represents that district? You're a Texan yourself. You've posted about how you believe in sensible gun legislation as a gun holder. Like, what are some of your takeaways from hearing something like that of people that are in those positions to potentially incite change on all of this?
You know, I have a couple thoughts on that. I actually just tweeted a couple minutes ago about the fact that Texas has no red flag laws. We don't have any, but 65% of Texans want red flag laws. And, you know, when you have Representative Self or Governor Abbott talking about mental health is the problem, mental health is the problem, well, then why don't we have red flag laws? Because they're clearly not doing anything about it. And red flag laws are in really response to folks with mental health issues that have guns and shouldn't have guns. We don't have background checks. If we had background checks, this is an individual who was discharged from the military because of mental health issues. That would have come up in a background check. So if mental health is their number one issue, they're doing absolutely nothing to mitigate that. So I really don't believe a lot of what they're saying. And I have to be honest with you, I know this is not why you brought me on here, but as a Jew who doesn't live that far from this area, I find it extremely offensive that he's kind of invoking religion here. We don't know the religion of the victims. And I think it's really disrespectful to do something like that.
Speaking of disrespectful, I think sometimes an argument we often hear is, well, actually, this comes up today. You know, we've had recently someone in a vehicle that by all likelihood was targeting passengers, at least what we're hearing from the Associated Press and other outlets. Tracy, how do you respond to people that look at something like today's incident and say, well, are you also going to try to ban vehicles as well? Like those who really try to take guns out of the argument and try to conflate this with other items in society that can also cause harm. Everything from household, kitchen things to the marble that I got to make sure my kid doesn't swallow. And I'm obviously being somewhat facetious, but in all seriousness, though, you've been on the ground. You've worked for multiple agencies, for the U.S. government, and thank you for your service in doing so. But when you hear arguments like that try to downplay the role of guns, when we talk about the noticeable uptick of violence in this country, where do you stand on that?
I don't understand the clinging to these assault style rifles. Look, I've had guns. I've carried guns at various points in my life. I've served in war zones. I've had assault style weapons in these war zones. And guess what? We need them in war zones. I am not someone who necessarily believes that the Second Amendment should be overturned. I think it would be, from a logistical standpoint, impossible. However, as you mentioned before, Nick, with cars, we have licenses to be able to drive those. You have to be a certain age to be able to do that. Your vehicle has to pass certain inspections. And I don't see too many people balking at that. When we had kids getting access to Tylenol who weren't supposed to, we put safety, containers on them. When somebody burned themselves with coffee, we put a warning on it. And so what I don't understand is this, I guess what I call it, unfettered, unchecked access to basically weapons of war, because that's what these are. I'm not originally from Texas. I don't know that I fully understood hunting, being from Southern California. Now I do. I understand that it's a sport, and I understand it's something that people have really grown up doing. But most of my friends that are hunters, they don't have assault weapons because they're using an assault weapon would make it so that you couldn't eat the meat of what you hunted. And that's where I really have a problem, is I'm not understanding why we are okay with having really little to no checks whatsoever on people who are gaining access to these weapons of war, and why we even have it in the first place.
Tracy, I mean, spoken like it was meant for my family members in Florida, where I currently live. So I'm with you on that. I don't get gripping to this piece of paper from the 1700s and stopping, by the way, at just that Second Amendment and not reading the rest of them. As a comedian once said, I want to ask you one question here about training, because you're trained with weapons. We had Ellie Honig a while back on. We were talking about, with all the classified document stuff, about the classified system, right? Like there's 4 million people that have access to classified documents, and there's no real organization around it in some cases, right? Should the U.S. government explore like a classification of weapons to reduce access to certain weapons for ordinary citizens like myself, who's never purchased one, and tomorrow I could easily go somewhere and get one because I have nothing in my background that says I would commit something like this? Like, what do you think can be done in terms of that?
I think that is actually an excellent idea, Mike, quite frankly. Here's the thing. We do the same thing, like you said, with the classification of documents, right? Given how much of a threat or endangerment they can be to national security, which would mean people could die, right? At its most highest classification, people will die if this information gets out there. It might be something to explore in terms of guns. If you want access to this assault weapon, which again, I'm having a really hard time understanding why it's even available, but if you want access to this assault weapon, then these are the hoops, I guess, proverbial hoops, that you have to jump through in order to do that. So I think that is something that I think is a very interesting concept to explore, although it doesn't obviously mitigate the issue of ghost guns and things, guns that can be illegally obtained through other methods. But still, I don't think that there's any reason to sort of throw our hands up just because there's other ways for people to get guns.
Well, listen, I can't take all the credit because that was Nick's question that he wrote in the sheet. So shout out to my co-host, Nick Zerera. He told me not to take credit for it. But you know what, folks? Like I always say, even in my day job, can't take credit for something I didn't think of. Tracy, you do a fantastic job over at NewsNation. They're lucky to have you. Like I mentioned, former CIA officer, FBI special agent. Go get her book as well, The Unexpected Spy. Can't thank you enough for coming on the program, Tracy, especially on short notice. So continued success to you. Please stay safe.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching the Can We Please Talk podcast. Whatever clip you just watched, we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stick around for some more. Subscribe to the channel. My partner's over here smashing the button, Come on, do me a favor. So hit subscribe.